conversations that I was a part of informally yesterday in the hotel, on the bus, and other places covered a lot of territory, and I'm sure the questions, I know that the questions you submitted will elicit conversation around a few of the more common points there. I'm not going to comment directly at this point on the questions, since there'll be another chance to do that in 20 minutes. But rather to step back from our two presentations yesterday and from these questions and offer a couple of ways to think about what we're doing or what the issues are, whether they're the issues in crisis or they're the issues in trying to position the arts within the curriculum or within the priority of the institution. So excuse me if I don't at this point go into the budgetary implications of that, which many of these questions concern, or I don't go into the campus politics or some of the other areas that we may choose to discuss. So what is it that I'd like to offer? I'm going to share with you an insight that my wife, who is a retired librarian, picked up from Lester Ashon, one of the well-noted university librarians of the 60s, 70s, and early 80s before he retired. And he was something of an expert on the issue of censorship or banning of materials in libraries, particularly public libraries where the less educated might be. And he always began his discussions with a question, and I think it's a question that we might ask ourselves in this context about what constitutes not just reasonable or marginally appropriate, but ideal forms of art for your mission at your institution, or at the other end, things you really hope you don't see or hear, more or less like the four examples that Mark gave us yesterday. And his question was this: when you consider a work of whatever kind, in a library of whatever kind, that is, according to somebody's estimate, not appropriate for the collection, do you look for one sustainable reason to reject that work and make that the basis of your decision? Or do you look for one unassailable strength of the work and make that the basis of your decision? Not to exclude other considerations, but where do your sympathies lie? With bringing forward something that has strength, but perhaps some undesirable weakness with it, or liability of another kind? Or do you just look for that one critical flaw and say, excuse me, there's enough things out there, we don't have to pick something that is so flawed relative to whatever the purposes of that particular library are? He always provoked very healthy discussions, according to my wife, and students did well with the concept. But I think all of us here as administrators know that those aren't the choices. At least they're not the only choices. Prudence suggests that in a university environment where a great deal more latitude is allowed and expected because of the advanced nature of our students relative to, say, patronage of a public library, we expect there to be a higher level of tolerance for difference of opinion. We expect cultural clashes. We expect religious beliefs not to clash with one another, but to be brought to bear on one another, because our graduates are going out into a world where these issues are salient, and they need to be prepared to deal with them in the workplace and in their communities and other places where they will take leadership positions in due time. So what does that have to do with the issue of what kind of art gets accepted on a campus? I mentioned yesterday that the space for the arts, whether it is gallery space or performance space in the theater, or space on a calendar in terms of the number of presentations that one art versus another form of art may be allowed to enjoy, or other departments that would like to schedule lectures in the same hall but seem precluded by the arts, who claim that they have first right on these facilities. These are dynamics about resources and about departmental priorities and institutional priorities. But if we bring it down to the level of somebody is proposing a work of art that is what? I'm not talking about the medium now, I'm talking about the characteristics of it. It is intentionally provocative at a very high level. It is countercultural, that is countercultural to the society. It is counter-mission in the sense that it directly is putting under scrutiny something dearly held by this institution, whether it's the religious tenets of the institution or the nature of the student body. I mean, we have Christian schools that don't have a single person of color in the student body. One could imagine a student coming forward and pushing on that point with the choice of an artistic production. One can imagine students who are of significantly different religious beliefs, or perhaps of no religious belief, choosing to use their artistic opportunity, or faculty for that matter, to push on the point that it isn't necessary to have faith or this faith in order to be a valued member of this particular community or the academy writ large. Using Lester Asheim's question, do we say, well, that's a fair topic, but this particular artistic rendition of it doesn't suit the standards of the institution. We don't mind at all that you're addressing that issue, but we expect you to do it tastefully and respectfully, and this particular work that has all those F words in it, or this particular work which has nudity in it, or this particular work which seems to make a point of affronting some other group on campus or in society, seems like it goes further than it needs to address the point that you're trying to make. Now, that's if you're thinking about art in a cognitive sense. If we're saying, all right, the art has a purpose, the artist has a purpose, the artist has an agenda, the institution has an agenda, let's think about making those match. But we all know that not all artists, and I'm not an artist, so we'll let Mark here say how it really works, but I suspect there are artists who draw from passion within them that don't necessarily fall in those logical categories. They simply paint or sculpt or write a play, and it may certainly and probably does reflect something deep within their own psyche, but it's not necessarily a social message form of art. But it has that impact on other people who don't know what's inside the artist, don't know what motivated the production of that art. They can only see the product, the play. Music, not so much an issue here unless there are words attached to it, but certainly any form of visual art. My basic take on that is that there is never a calculus that will allow administrators, or for that matter, faculty peers, to make absolute judgments, particularly far enough in advance to make that preclude all forms of crisis that come out of the choice of art or where the art is performed on campus or whether it's performed at all. There will always be the boundary issues. But I do think that the very end of Mark's comments yesterday, he was saying that among the tips he would offer is that perhaps there be an annual sort of programming meeting in the spring so that we can not only schedule facilities for the fall and publicity, but so that we also have the months, at least a month or a couple months perhaps during the summer, to have those discussions about what is the cumulative impact of all those individual decisions on the campus. And this is the point that I really want to dwell on. Cumulative impact. My take, at least on the title of this program, the Arts as Institutional Signature, is we're talking arts plural. And when Mark asked you yesterday, what do you think of as the arts? There were 20 different answers, and probably a few more could have been added. Over the course of a year, or over the course of several years, if any one person were to attend all or a substantial proportion of those, how would they describe this institution's art signature based not on what is written, not on what is in recruitment literature, or what the art faculty say to prospective students or one another, but how would a reasonably well-informed person who is typical of the audience on campus or visitors to the campus, what would they say to describe your art signature? Now, they don't know what goes on in the classroom. They don't know what goes on in private tutorials. They don't hear the debates that faculty have among one another, or chairs and deans and provosts and presidents have about they see the productions. They see the play, they see the exhibit, they see other forms of art, the built art, the Christmas cards, whatever, and draw conclusions about what's important to this campus. What is the experience students get is inferred from that public face. Now, if that public face is created solely by the discrete decisions of this student club and that faculty member, and maybe that department, which is a little more collegial over there, and a few people in the graphics and public relations departments who make decisions about what happens with print material and banners and all the other things, including school colors, which I know is beyond the pale. But when you put all that together, do you really want a very important face of your campus to be just the sum of what individual people decide virtually on their own, and if they're faculty, they claim academic freedom and push that as far as they choose to? Or is it reasonable to say there ought to be a conversation here? There is plenty of freedom for artists in all media to be creative without going all the way out there or all the way out there, or so often over there that nobody ever goes over there. Is there not room for institutional discussion about that? Certainly within the arts community itself, but also beyond the arts community by all of us who are affected. In some ways, it's akin to saying, well, every so often, don't we look at our liberal studies program and ask whether it's serving the institutional mission, whether we could do better, whether what we're doing fits the expectations of today's students and today's faculty? Is it competitive in the marketplace so that we can draw talented students to our campus? Can we not take a view like that with regard to the cumulative body of work and all the various people who come to bear on that work in terms of the arts signature that we present to the larger world? I think obviously the answer is yes. How can you do that? I don't have the time to go into the how. If you want to ask about it, we can talk about how various campuses do that. But generally speaking, we're going to do it by taking some of the advice that Mark and I gave you yesterday in very short form. And they are going to do it by being very intentional about the arts, and that's where I'm going to end. Intentionality is important if the arts are going to be a part of the institution's signature. Having an accidental set of arts created from the bottom up, but without conversation about the cumulative impact and cumulative presentation, seems to me not just a recipe to encourage those outliers that will become serious crisis moments on our campus, but at the other end of the spectrum, going back to Asheim's 2 points, there's the, what are we trying to do here, and are we doing that well? Or what are we trying to avoid, and are we avoiding that well? I think also a failure to have a campus discussion, at least periodically, about the cumulative impact and the cumulative intention is also likely to miss some of the great opportunities that we have, not just to promote our institution, but also to educate our students and affect the larger communities who are part of the audience for our arts. So I think I'll stop there, and we'll reserve to the question period some nuts and bolts issues. At least I will.
I'll just pick up briefly on Dick's comment that some of my remarks yesterday are focused on things you can do on the front end to agree so that there's an agreement across various constituencies. What I'll talk about then is what you do on the other side of it, because even if you left here today and said, all right, we're going to start to do this, in reality it'll take you 3 to 5 years. And that's assuming all of you will still be in your posts 3 to 5 years.